This tutorial is going to be about using the autotrace tool for effect. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to jump into Photoshop. With the image, resolution plays a big factor in the way that it traces. So if I come up and have a look at this within Photoshop and I go to image size, it's a big image. So what I've been doing is I know that 100 for the resolution is a good size, and then I've been changing this top number to be around about 10 or 11 megabytes. So at the moment that's perfect, so I could save it, and then I've been doing another one where I reduce the size down. I leave the resolution on 100 and I reduce it down, so up here for image size it says about 1.6 or a couple of megabytes. So this is what I'm doing, and then okaying it and saving it, and I'll show you the effect it has in Illustrator. So within Illustrator, if I show you, I have the two images. So one is going to be a lower resolution, the kind of 2 megapixel one, and the other one's going to be about 11 or 12. And I've done that for both images. So if we come back to this first image and I click on it, obviously I need to bring in the image trace, so I'll go to Window, Image Trace, bring that menu in, it's going to pop it here, and so it comes up. So nothing's highlighted, so sometimes I have to click off back on the image and it all comes up. The first thing I'm going to put it on is I'm going to put it on Color. By default, sometimes Advanced will be closed. Make sure it's open. So I have it on Color, and this is coming up with a limited. So at the moment it says it's going to do it in 30 colors. So that's okay. I'll go okay with that. The paths, how loosely or how high it's going to adhere to the contours, corners, whether they're sharp or lesser. So it's always talking about the smoothness of the image. Noise, all the little incidentals, the higher it is, the less noise you have. The method, I always use it on the first one. If you put it on the second one, it does a strange kind of double line. It's like one shape overlapping another. It gives a different kind of effect. It's not bad, I'm just not so keen on it. And then I can go preview. Let's go okay. Once that's done, if I go Command Y, you'll see that nothing's happened, and it's because I have to go to Object and I must expand it to be able to get into the lines. Object and Fill, that's good, I'll just go OK. And we can see now that it's come up. So let's have a look at the next one, and we'll do the same thing. I'll put it on Color, I'll leave these settings as the default like before. 30, I go preview, I'll go Object, Expand. Now that process was a lot faster, and what you'll see, I just close that for a second and look at these two images. Is the shape of this, and then on here, see the detail around here on the ground, and it's a bit looser here. It's because this one on the left would have been the 11 megabyte image, and this one would be the 1.6. So one, it goes through the tracing faster, but it also has a level of detail. Sometimes too much detail can be a bit rough to deal with. So we'll have a look at this first image for a start. Now the direct selection tool, so this is the white arrow. If I click and hold down, it has a lasso tool. The significance of this is it lets you select out areas quite carefully rather than just being a square box, and it gives you a lot more control. So I'm going to select around the motorbike a wee bit, select this area around the outside, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a fill of none. Sometimes over here on the menu it can be a bit slow. It worked alright that time, but usually I do it through the swatches. It seems to work a bit faster. Fill none. Line, I'm going to make it blue, and I'm just going to check the stroke. I always put it on the finest line I can. That's just the look that I prefer. I click on the background and I can see what's happening. It's eaten into the motorbike a little bit. I'm okay with that. But I always want you to think in terms of the composition. So in this case, I'm going to drag into this image a wee bit, highlight part of it. Now when it's a line, if I go delete once and then I click it off, you can see that it's given a bit of a harsh line. Usually this deleting once can work really well, and this one is probably not working quite so well because of the detail of the image. So if I delete once, let's have a look, it's still a bit sharp. So I'll delete twice this time, we'll see how it is. Delete once, you can see these areas are still highlighted. Delete twice. Yeah, it's probably the fineness of the image. I'll show you in a different area, but I'm still kind of trying to think in terms of what I can do with this image. Delete twice. With the kind of negative and positive, and getting a better look and feel to the edge. There's so much detail in this ground cover that it's not working so well, but I quite like this little bit out here, a little bit of framing. Let's come in and have a look at some of these areas here. So again, I'll delete once, and if I have a look at the edge, it's a bit harsh, especially when you're dealing with coloured shapes. I'll undo that and I'll delete twice. Just gives a better fragmented edge, especially when you're doing colour like this. So I'm going to try and cut back down through here. Delete once, delete twice. Okay, but much I'll do one undo. I'll just push that back where it was. And so let's come and have a look and see what the difference is with this image. So I'm going to do more or less the same thing. I'm going to go around the edge of the motorbike. I'm going to put it on, again, a fill of none, a line of that kind of deep blue. I'm going to go to the stroke. I'm going to make sure it's a fine line. So this is the one that was a little bit more low res. So let's see how it looks now when we kind of eat into that image a little bit. So if I delete once, it's better up around here. That's kind of doing quite a good look. I'll try deleting twice. Still a bit harsh. It's just, I think, just too much detail in this area, but we'll keep eating into it bit by bit, and you'll notice that I'm only deleting once, trying to, other time I did it twice, trying to get a better line. I can see the shape of this is a little bit odd, so if I delete it once, have a look, a little bit harsh, delete once, look, leaves a nice line, so it's kind of trying to look at the way that line gets left. With this, I'm going to delete this little area out around the motorbike. And then through here I'm going to get a little area here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go fill is none, back to that blue colour, check the stroke width, and this time when I go over these points, if I hold down the command key, you will see that the icon changes and I end up with an arrow with a little square. If that doesn't happen, you can always go up here, hold down and pick the direct selection tool, or press A just to drag it across. But in this case, I can hold down the command key on Mac. It will hold those points and I can drag them across. Click on the background. Not so sure about this curve line, so I'm just going to select it and hit delete twice. And with this area, I'm going to grab it all. I'm going to go to the swatches. In this case, a fill of none again, and this time with the line, I'm going to make it kind of a magenta color. Whoops, I'll just make sure the fill's on none. The stroke, fine stroke. I come down here and the whole thing selected, so I'm just going to move it across a bit. I'm trying to change it so that it doesn't look just like a kind of big square box sitting out here over the side. So compositionally this is starting to become a bit more interesting. Chop it once. So again, I'm just trying to get rid of that kind of, some of that harsh line work at the bottom. Delete once. And in this case it's working just to delete it once. So now the whole thing is becoming a bit more of an interesting image, a bit more of an interesting composition. Scale it. You know, composition, looking at the white space, it's all starting to work a little better. In this case, I'm going to try deleting out the wall a bit, just because it's kind of straight lines. It's never quite working. This area here, I'll leave that shape, and this stuff here I'm going to see if I can take it to a line. So a fill of none, a line, I might try the ready color again, and stroke on point. Alright, so I like that a wee bit. Select all of this. Scale it down slightly. So I'm getting a more nicely kind of composed illustration. I can also select an area like this and move it. Oops. And if I click on the black arrow tool, so using the V key, I can take that area now and I can rotate it as well. I can scale it a little bit, so I'm just trying to make a better composition with the stroke. I can up the stroke if I want. Oh, okay, that's a little bit harsh. I'll take it back down to a fine line. Okay, so again, this kind of manipulation is starting to make a far more interesting image. Obviously, if I click on it with this tool, it's going to pick everything. So I have A for the direct selection tool. See what happens if I move this up a wee bit. It's kind of moving behind, but again, we're getting some nice things happening with the composition. Delete a little bit out at the top. Maybe again, I'll take that kind of area out that's forming the straight line. And so we're getting a couple of images that look far more interesting. Let's put them side by side. Right, okay, so we've got some nice compositions that are starting to happen there. Now this one here, let's go back to the image trace tool. So again, one of them is going to be fine, and the other one's going to be a bit bigger. So with this, when we put it on color, the other option here is where we've got limited. We've also got full tone. So with this one, I'll go limited, but I'm going to pull it down now. So now it's only going to have 11 colors in it. We'll bump the noise up. Paths I'm going to put down low as well. And let's go preview on this one. Remember, always expand it to be able to work on it. So this one, a limited color palette. I'd say by the detail in here that this was probably the bigger image. So with this one, this time, I'm going to put it on color, but instead of limiting it, I'm going to go full tone. Again, we'll go expand. So it has a lot of detail, but even though that was on full tone and all this detail, it went faster because it was the lower resolution image. So let's start with this one and see what we can do. So again, I'm going to try and roughly trace around the car. And I'm going to start by going to the swatches. I'm going to give it a fill of none. The line, I'm going to make it magenta. And the stroke, put it down on a fine line again. We can see the kind of detail around the edge there because of the full tone image. I'm going to take this window and see if I can do the same thing. So swatches are full of none. a line of magenta, a stroke of 1. Now with this tool, I can click anywhere and kind of drag through, which is a really nice aspect of this. I'm going to hold down the command key. You can see in this case it's changed to a black arrow, but it's still going to do the same thing. It's still going to let me pull that image through. So you can get some rather lovely things starting to happen. I'm going to pull through this image, delete once. You can see that's given me probably a harsh line. Delete twice. It's given me a slightly different, but because the tone is so fine, it's going to be really, really awkward to get anything that's all that loose. So in this case, I'm going to leave the fill, but with the line, I'm going to give it something. So I'll try green this time. Stroke. Put it on a fine stroke. Look, and if we zoom in on that image, you're going to see the green lines coming out, but the tone just staying the same. So probably a harder one to try and make it look all that great compositionally, but we'll see what we can do. The negative space and everything is just going to be a wee bit harder. One. There we go. Yeah, probably need to delete it twice. Break into this a bit, but much harder to get kind of good shapes coming through. I can try, but there's just so much detail within the image. So let's grab a bit of this. Command, drag it, and if I go back onto this tool, see I can rotate. See if I can move it over again. That's good. This time I grabbed just the right amount. And so all of this stuff, if I grab areas and I go V, so I end up with a black arrow tool, I can move it, and of course I've got the option to rotate it slightly as well. So there's a lot you can kind of play around with here. So in this case, I'm going to maybe get rid of some of that detail. The top is a little bit harsh in places, and this one is a bit better. You can see when the lines are looser that it cuts into it a bit better. It's a little bit harder when if I delete once, a little bit harder when you have all that detail. But when you don't, you can have some really nice aspects where you delete it once and it kind of leaves little bits of lines and lets negative space kind of feed into it. So it's okay. It's not my ideal, but but we'll go to the one that's a little bit less intense. So the full tone image will bring its own kind of issues. So with this one, swatches, we'll fill it with none again. The line, I'll make it magenta. The stroke, I'll make it nice and fine. using a fine line does make the images look really good. It can sometimes be a bit awkward, but this stuff here you'll find now, if I delete once, you end up with some kind of interesting line work starting to happen. That time I deleted it twice. I delete once. Something that you just have to experiment with a little bit. I'm going to get rid of some of this kind of pink stuff at the bottom. Just hit once, and I'll take a little bit of this kind of straight line, work out at the corner once, and now what I'm going to do, I'll enlarge on this bit is I'm going to get an area of the car here. Hold down the Command key. In this case, it wasn't doing a very good job. I'll try it again. Command key isn't quite working, so in this case I am going to go to the direct selection tool. Now I can get my arrowhead with the marker. I'm going to bring this across. I'm just going to hit Q because it will take me back to the lasso tool, and I'm going to pick a thinner strip through here. Get the arrow tool again, and this time I'm going to bring it down. And again, this time Q, so I get that lasso tool. I'm going to pick another little bit through here. Oh man, it's getting hard to see what's going on now. Okay, now with this, I can, using the A tool, I'm just going to delete some of these circular areas out. I'll leave the line, but I'm not so keen on some of these big blobs that start to warp. So I'm just clicking on it once and taking it out. I can take out those lines if I want to. Again, just hitting once is enough to get rid of them. So taking out the curves, and I'll run another little bit through, so Q, where I can knock out the colour. See what happens here. So colour, none, line. You can see now how much it's taken out. So line, I'll make it green, stroke, 1 point. And it's okay, you know, sometimes the certain images are going to work better than others. But again, I'm trying to work it so I'm always looking at the composition. Let's have a look at the two of these things together. Alright, so not so bad. I think I definitely like the motorbike images better. So I'm going to do a little wee bit of recolouring. So let's have a look at this image here. So while I've got it highlighted, I can go to the recolour tool, but just before I do, swatches, I'm going to go to the library, and I'm going to bring in some other images. Formula, so this is just bringing in gradients. I'll bring in one gradient. I'll show you what that does in a minute. But let's have a look at foods. Let's go for beverages, and it'll bring in a whole lot of colour options. If I drag the folder, it adds it. Let's go kid stuff. Going to get some brighter colours now, so I'll grab that folder and bring it in, and I end up with a few colour menus in here. So now I'll go to the recolor tool up here. If you don't have this, it's possibly just because of the window, the workspace. It might be on Essentials. Just pop it onto Essentials Classic. So with this, I can go Advanced Options, and you'll see in this case that I have all these kind of color options up here. So I can go brights and see how it changes it. Green tea was the other one I had. Jelly beans was the kids one. So the first thing I have is I have this here that randomly changes the color order. Gives you lots of options. I've got this one here that randomly changes the saturation and the brightness. So I like the kind of slightly more pastel-y look. You can see here I've got a whole lot of options. So if I go to the orange, I can change the hue, and you're going to see it change through the image here. So let's say I go for a blue. I can bump up the saturation to make it brighter. I can dull down the brightness to make it darker. So I can alter these to the level I want. The other thing we have here is we have edit. If I click edit, all of these things at the moment are linked together. So if I move one, the whole color wheel kind of changes. Just before you come in, I'm finishing off a tutorial. Claire's tested positive for COVID, and Henry and I have done a test, and we're both negative. So he's here with me, and Claire's positive, and with Felicity. But I was with Claire before she did the test at Felicity's. So even though it's kind of
I
day.
won't come in. I was just going to pop in and see how it was Stuart's funeral, but I'll stay away.
Yeah,
I
okay.
was just coming to get the letter.
Yeah, okay, cool.
The funeral was okay?
Yeah, well, it was good. He was a lot more religious than I thought, but
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Okay,
it was good.
Safe.
All right. So changing this, everything kind of keeps in order. If I unlink it, then I've got the option to modify some of these things. So you'll see the blue here. I can swirl it around into the yellow. It's going to change the color. And again, I've still got the option here to change the color, change the saturation and the brightness. So we can modify a lot of that stuff. If I pull it in or out, you can see it having an effect on these areas down here. Overall, I can bump up the colors or take them down. This is just dealing with the brightness. So lots of options to play with here. I'll go OK. Yes, and so it's a very quick way to mess with the colors and get different iterations. Let's try with these ones here. So let's try with this full tone image. Okay, if I go to advanced option, and if I look at this, there's going to be an extreme amount of colors because it was full tone. So let's pop it on brights. And you can see that's already cut it down to just a number of colours. Jelly beans, green tea, greys, all colours is going to take it back to what it was before. And I'll change the hierarchy of this around. It's slower just because of all the processing. Quite like that. I'll look at playing with the saturation and the brightness. And maybe I'll just beef that up a bit myself. You can see that it's got just one colour selected at the moment. It's the kind of yellow, so I can come into the green and bump the brightness of that up. Yeah, I like the pastel colour, so I'll go OK. Yes. And very quickly we've got quite a dramatic change.